So, it's been a little while since we've we didn't cover this earlier this week, so time to cover it now. Almost a full week ago, Bernie Sanders unveiled his criminal justice reform plan. He included in it basically all of the main things that a lot of progressives and lefty thinkers have been talking about. We want to drastically reduce the prison population. We want to ban private prisons. We want to ban the practice of civil asset forfeiture. We want to ban basically people being in jail for unable to pay bail. We want to give felons the right to vote. Did I already mention that? I don't know. There are a lot of things in here that are really great. So he says, if we stand together, we can eliminate private prisons and detention centers. No more profiteering from locking people up. He says, if we stand together, we can end the disastrous war on drugs. If we stand together, we can end cash bail. No more keeping people in jail because they're too poor. If we stand together, we can enact real police department reform and prosecute police brutality. If we stand together, there is nothing we cannot accomplish. This is great. I mean, this is a major thing that the United States needs to address and hasn't done so in a very, very long time. We have a disproportionate number of people incarcerated in this country. We have a larger prison population than China does. Even not even per capita, just straight prison population is larger than China's prison population. We incarcerate 2.2 million people in this country. Mm-hmm. Why? So a lot of what Sanders talks about in his plan, he would only have the authority as president over federal prisons. But a lot of this does include incentives for state correctional facilities to come alongside that. It combats things like mandatory minimum sentencing and encouraging judges to go with maximum sentencing and things like that. War on drugs, obviously, is a major contributor to the prison population, and this addresses that as well. This is basically all of the things that we really, really want out of criminal justice reform. What I found funny, the Washington Examiner did a story on this also, and they basically said, hey, this is really good, except for that felons voting. They want to make child rapists go vote. And it's like, why do they always single out child rapists? He's not saying I specifically want to make child rapists vote. He's saying I want felons to have the ability to vote. Why do they always single out the most socially deplorable particular crime? Like that percentage of the prison population is not massive. I'm okay with people who are in prison on drug crimes voting. I'm frankly in favor of anyone who's in prison on a felony charge voting, because they are at the whim of the state. And if you completely disaffect them and completely take away their voting rights, you're dehumanizing those people who don't deserve it.
And at the same time, those same prisons get to, very much like the 3/5 compromise, get to have their prisoners that are incarcerated not vote at the same time they count towards their census report. So they're still making money off those prisoners physically being there in a government sense. But I think that the point that they always make, that they, like what Paul was saying, is because the other way of saying it is, hey, why do we want all these black people to vote? Why are they doing that? That's really the real, because it's like, look at the number of people who commit those type of serious crimes like Paul's talking about, and then compare that to people that are sitting in jail because they can't afford bail, people are sitting in jail because they smoked weed, things of that nature. You're going to have it so outsized. So are we saying that because child rapists exist, that hundreds of thousands and millions of people should therefore not lose the right to vote because it's too difficult? I think I've heard Sanders' campaign talk about this enough, and they basically said, look, the second you start drawing a line on when and which American citizens can vote, where do you draw that line? We've seen in the last several hundred years of American history and policy exactly what happens. And the other thing I would make as a point is, child rapists aren't a major voting constituent. It's not that many. It's not gonna flip elections.
But the Boston bomber would get to vote.
No, okay, so guys.
Oh no, all one of him. How will 300 million Americans stand up?
He
to
might
him?
sway the election.
Okay, so here's
he might live in Florida.
He's like Susan Sarandon.
So here's something that we have to remember, though, guys, and that is, we've heard this time and time again, and that is, this country is a place where people can get a second chance, restart their lives over, and we've always heard these stories about people just rebuilding themselves. Well, as soon as a person does their time in jail, okay, they did their time. It's time to reintroduce them and reintegrate them into society. But if there is a system put in place that's going to deny a person to be involved, well, they're going to be put right back into the prison industrial complex. That's how this thing works. And look, there are more private prisons being built here in this country because of the influence of the prison industrial complex. They're able to profit off this, and the reason why is because it's a ridiculous war on drugs. And look at who the war on drugs impacts the most. It really impacts minority communities, African American, Latino communities, and thus there's now a whole system of free slave labor that the prison industrial complex gets to basically exploit for free. And
hey, kid, it's not free. They pay those people 11 cents an hour and then charge them $20 for maxi pads.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. And allowing them to have the right to vote allows them to actually think that they can make an impact. Look, they have to be involved in human society. They have to be involved in our society at one point or the other. And the majority of the population that's behind bars are those who have been the victims of the war on drugs. And it's just not men. It's also women, too, that are behind bars. They have every right to be involved. And let's not also forget, too, how many women, especially in conservative states, who actually had to defend themselves by dealing with an abusive partner, or perhaps maybe having an abortion. In some states, that's illegal to do, and they are serving time behind bars. The serious crime was what? Protecting their reproductive right or protecting their own safety?
What was that person? I forget her name. I think it was out of Georgia or something like that. She just got clemency from the governor because she was a child sex slave.
Yeah. And
she shot one of the people
that was going to kill her.
Yeah. And then she took his money, and so from the back in whatever that Southern District's view was, well, she clearly orchestrated it, and it's her fault, and she should get first-degree murder because she took his money, and that wasn't just self-defense, even though she took the money to get away.
I got another example. I got another
but
example.
She shouldn't vote. No.
I got another example too. Look, let's look at the forest fires that happen on the West Coast. They are going to be happening more and more often. And you want to know who's on the front lines? Firefighters. And you want to know who's helping those firefighters? A lot of prisoners. And these prisoners are getting the experience of knowing how to combat these fires and protect people's homes and their livelihoods. But as soon as that said prisoner gets out of jail, guess what? They cannot apply to be a fireman. They cannot provide to be a first responder, even though they have years of experience on the front line, putting their livelihoods at risk, being paid what again, Daniel? 11 cents an hour?
Yeah, enough.
I mean, I'm not familiar with the California state laws in regards to what
actually California is much better. I think it's $2 an hour.
Yeah,
$2 an hour.
Enough to afford toothpaste at the commissary once every 6 months.
Wow,
pretty good.
That's madness, and that's the reality of what we have here in the United States. So when Senator Bernie Sanders says he wants to help prisoners the right to vote, I'm in support of it, because if we start drawing the line, like Daniel says, if we start drawing the line onto who can vote and who cannot vote, well then guess what, everyone? I don't care what your political ideology is, Democrat, Independent, Republican, your votes can be denied as well. And we got to stop that from happening.
A couple of things I wanted to add before we move on. So in April, Bernie was speaking at a town hall in Muscatine, Iowa, and he says, "I think it is absolutely the direction we should go." He's speaking of giving the right to vote to felons. In my state, what we do is separate. You're paying a price. You committed a crime. You're in jail. That's bad. But you're still living in American society, and you still have a right to vote. We focused a lot on the right to vote while we were talking about this, but I do want to point out that this criminal justice reform plan is broad and it does a lot of really great things, and it very correctly points out that our current criminal justice system is predominantly punitive against people who are committing minor crimes against society, drug possession, for example.
Okay.
We should not be running a punitive system of justice. We should be running a rehabilitative system of justice.
All right. So there's a couple of things I want to read out here. Bluebell 51. I was attacked by my ex-boyfriend with a hammer, and when I fought back, the police threatened to arrest me when I was in radiology getting x-rays. I'm very sorry that happened to you. And then Wesley Wiles, I think this is what you said, Dan, in regards to being paid $2. $1.75 an hour. It could be around $2 right now. I'll look it up real quick. Nonetheless, I mean, come on, don't be doing that, all right? And And then AR Francis, I already feel if my vote is not counted. Well, that's what happens when we have a corrupt neoliberal system. You're absolutely correct. So, everyone, I mean, we got to remember, we got to fight for a better future, and we have to respect each other, and more importantly, just making sure that people do have that right and privilege to vote. And this war on drugs is denying people that basic right.